Okay, welcome everybody to this month's risk reduction class. And we're going to take a turn into a different direction for this month. And that is we're going to talk more from a sales perspective than a transactional, risk management, legal perspective. Although the information in this class is going to help you in dealing with real estate problems. And so this class probably serves two purposes. One, to help you with your sales, but two, to help you with your transactional problems and issues as they come up. Let's talk about winning words and phrases. This is maybe my favorite subject matter of any class I present. I've been presenting this kind of a class for nearly 20 years. And I've collected quite a bit of words and phrases. I'm going to talk about, that in a moment. And I enjoy sharing this information, and hopefully you'll find it very useful. I love selling. I'm not into selling. Selling is in me. I think sales is perhaps one of the most noble professions. And when I talk about sales, I'm talking about capital S selling, not small s selling. Small s selling is that stereotypical high pressure used car salesman type approach. Capital S sales, and I'm going to give you a few definitions, including mine in a moment. I'm often asked, I've not sold real estate for 25 years, and I'm often asked, do I miss that? And I got to tell you, I sell more today than I've ever sold in my life. I have to sell. I sell the other side on what I'm trying to present. I've got to sell sometimes our own agents on, the best solution. And so I'm not out of sales at all, even though I'm in the management and not selling now. Let's look at selling for a moment. The definition of selling. A gentleman I highly recommend, he writes great books, Daniel Pink, Pink. He has a very, very good book that's called Everybody Sells. And his premise is that every person in society is engaged in selling, not just professional salespeople. His definition's pretty good: moving others to part with resources so that both parties get what they want, and it leaves the client better off, especially in a selling situation. That's a nice academic definition of selling. I've also come upon this definition by some of the gurus out there. It's building relationships, listening to the customer, and then helping them achieve their goal. I like that definition. My definition, I've been saying it so long, I think I created it. Maybe somebody said it to me years and years and years ago, but I think it's mine. And many of you know this. Helping people make decisions they might not make without you, and they thank you for it later. Selling, especially in real estate, really is getting people to make decisions they don't normally make. I don't think there's much of a sales career in the water department. People don't think about whether they want water or not. They don't think about maybe tomorrow will be a better time. They don't think, I think I'll go home and think about it, come back and get my glass tomorrow. No, they make those decisions. But in real estate, people tend to put off decisions, often to their detriment. So when you help people make a decision and they benefit from it, they often thank you for it. And that's my definition of selling. Now, selling is more than just getting the client, to move forward in a positive way. Selling is also involved in problem solving, and I love problem solving. That's probably my second love, and it's, like I said, it has a lot of selling in it. When resolving problems, I have to sell the other side on the solution. Sometimes I have to sell you on what you should do. And of course, in the teaching I do, effective teaching and training involves selling the student on a best practice and getting them past their comfort zone or past their preconceived notions, which can be a problem in getting people to adopt new ideas. And so, teaching involves selling and problem solving as well. I've also got some definitions of problem solving: identifying the issue, the problem, determining, and then implementing the solution. Okay, that's pretty academic, makes sense. Defining the problem, generating potential solutions, and then implementing the best solution. Both of those make a lot of sense. It doesn't have one key element. My definition of problem solving is helping people understand the problem and then selling them on the best solution. And so I think selling is a big part of problem solving. So your goal when you're selling is to provide clarity to the customer, to give the customer confidence so that when they act, they're comfortable acting. And then finally, to gain commitment from the customer, and sometimes my quote customer, all of you folks are always my customer. Sometimes for the moment, my customer is the other side. I'm trying to get commitment from the other side to do things. Sometimes it's pretty simple what I want them to do. Sometimes it's pretty tough for them to make that decision. But my goal is to get commitment from them. So the key to selling and the problem solving is to master the art of effective communication. It starts with communication. I could do a whole seminar on effective communication. And in fact, I had a few notes I was going to provide in this seminar, but it made it too long. And I want to get right to the meat and potatoes of dialogues, of words, of things you can say that perhaps will make you a more effective communicator in your sales situations and in your problem-solving situations. I'm kind of on a quest, if you will. For as long as I've been in real estate, I've been working on getting my PhD in dialogue. I kind of dream that someday I'll become the doctor of dialogue. I don't know what university will award that to me, but I'm studying so that when I find that university, I can take the exam, do my recitation, and maybe receive my PhD in dialogue. Over the years, I've collected dialogue from just about everybody. If there's a guru out there, I probably have all their material and all their dialogue. And a lot of what I'm going to give to you today is a collection that I've collected over the years of the most effective dialogues that I've been able to find. The right words and when to say them. That's the key. The right words and phrases get you past the noise of the other person's conscious brain. People's conscious brain, your conscious brain right now is filled with noise. Not only are you listening to me, I hope you are, but whatever's going on in your life at this moment, whether it be a distraction in the next room or a problem you're dealing with in a transaction or what you're going to do as soon as this class is over and all of that, that's all the kinds of noise that goes on in your conscious brain. These words and phrases are designed to get past the conscious brain and into the quiet subconscious brain. The subconscious brain is a relatively quiet mechanism. Why is it quiet? Because it tends to act on habit. It doesn't take a lot in unless you purposely direct it to your subconscious, and that's a subject for another seminar. What it does is it responds reflexively. And by the way, in the subconscious, that's where most decisions are made. So to get to the point, these words and phrases are designed to get past the conscious and into the subconscious. And that's a little academic, but that is exactly what will happen if you master using these phrases at the right time in the right situations. All right, so the first set of words and phrases I want to give you are a set of words that I and others have called money makers. And the reason they're called money makers is these words will help you move the selling process forward. Making a sale, I don't need to tell you this, y'all know it, is a journey with a lot of bumps along the way. Like I said, selling water, there are no bumps. You either turn on the spigot or you turn off the spigot. But buying a house, listing a house, selling a house, all of you know a lot of bumps along the way. So these money makers are designed to help you move over the bumps and get you to a positive outcome when sometimes that might be in doubt. So they're almost magical in their quality, and I can tell you I've used them myself in sales. I use them in problem solving, and you're going to recognize some of these. Walt, you say that a lot. So let me go through them. I'm going to give you the word and then how you use the word. Okay, so the first money maker is no problem. Now, no problem is a phrase that is often used in what I think is an incorrect way. I want to give you an example of the incorrect way to use no problem, at least in my opinion, and the correct way to use no problem, or the more beneficial way, if you will. I'm sort of on a soapbox. I may sound like I'm preaching because I'm just so convinced that these words have almost magic powers. Where a lot of people incorrectly, in my opinion, use no problem is a response to a thank you. And that's almost a pet peeve of mine. Now think about this. I'm wearing a tie today and I meet somebody and they say, well, that's a pretty tie. I like that tie. And imagine what I'm saying if I say, oh, this old thing, I've had it for years. It's been in the back of my closet. There's nothing special. What I'm really saying is you got no taste. You're thinking this is a sharp tie, but it's nothing. This is an old rag I had in the back of my closet. You're sort of slapping the compliment. Well, that's how people use no problem all the time. Thank you for helping me with that. Even holding the door for somebody. You hold the door for somebody and the typical response is they thank you and you say no problem. And if you really think about it on a psychological level, it's like, I didn't do anything, nothing you, wasn't you. Nothing, no problem. So I recommend don't say that. Now, if you got to say something, and it's a phrase I use all the time, because, I do get a lot of thanks. That's one of the things I love about my job. I help people and they thank me. In fact, if I didn't get the thanks, that you guys give me, I think Mike would have to pay me a whole lot more. But I really, really enjoy, helping people. And like everybody, I'm no different than everybody else. When somebody thanks me for that, it makes my day. You will never hear me say no problem. That's sort of dismissing what I did for you. What I do say is often, of course, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. I'm happy to help. So that's the wrong way to use no problem. Now, here's the right way to use no problem. When you get an obstacle, especially an early obstacle that will take you off course if you deal with it, and you're going to deal with that obstacle later. Now's not the right time. So how do you deal with it? No problem. And then you move on. You stay on track. Now, give you a couple of common examples. You ring the doorbell on a listing appointment and you walk into the house and the first thing the seller says to you is, by the way, we're not listing tonight. We're not signing anything tonight. Well, I don't have a pen in my hand. I don't have the contract in my hand. I'm not going to ask you to sign anything for at least an hour. So talking about whether you're going to sign a contract now, a listing, a contract now or later, is pointless. It gets in the way. So I'm going to say no problem. I'm in the very early stages of my listing presentation, which is, heavily weighted in the front end with asking the seller questions. And they blurt out, by the way, we don't want to pay a full commission. We're not paying 6%. Well, one of the ways to lose in dealing with a commission is talk about it too early. They've got to see your value before they're going to pay you your value. And so they're not going to see your value in the first 30 minutes of you walking in. So no problem. And in my brain, I'm going to deal with that later. I've used this since I've learned it, I've used it for probably the last 25, 30 years, very effectively. No problem. Why is that? Now, why is that is not my favorite way to phrase this. I'm going to give you a slightly better way to phrase it because why is a challenging word. one of the things, sometimes the tips are worth as much as the content. I don't know if I'm going to talk about it again later or not, but I'll talk about it now and I won't have to. Why tends to create resistance? It tends to create the situation where the person who made the statement, made a statement and you say why, they have to defend it, and that becomes defensive. So why is that may not be the best phrase, although sometimes it's okay. What makes you say that? I don't have that written here, but you can write it down. What makes you say that? Now, that is whenever you're at a loss for words, whenever somebody says to you something and you don't know what to say, well, what makes you say that? And they'll start talking, and that will give you a little more insight as to what they want to do. I don't want to list my house tonight. Okay, no problem. Now, what makes you say that? And I'm not going to deal with the objection yet. I'm just buying a little time, and I'm understanding a little bit of what they're thinking. And more importantly, I'm not in a position to have to respond to them. Whenever you don't know what to say to something that somebody else says, there's two responses you can give, both good. One is, what makes you say that? And the other response is to repeat what they say with a question mark. Back to the examples I'm giving. I'm not going to list my house tonight. Okay. You're not going to list tonight? Okay. All right. No problem. All right. I would is when you are asked a question and the question includes an answer that's advantageous to what you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes all you have to do is say, I would. Yeah. The typical way we teach it over the years is, you're in a condo, again, on a listing presentation, and Walt, do you think we should include the washer and dryer with this? Yeah, I would. Simple as that. Just a little simple phrase. The buyer, maybe, should we make a 3% deposit? Yeah, I would. It's when they actually suggest the action, then sort of give them comfort. Remember, they need to feel comfortable. Give them comfort with a comforting response. Yeah, I would, with a slight little nod. Now, sometimes they don't suggest what they should do. So you can suggest it by saying, should I or should we? Should I indicate a 3% deposit? Because you're up, in this market, you're up to a lot of competition, and a good deposit's going to help you. And that deposit's not at risk as long as you maintain all your contingencies correctly. That's for a different class. So you could say, should I, in the condo washer dryer situation, should I include the washer and dryer in this? So should I is just a nice way to suggest a course of action, or should we? It's nice. It puts you in the picture. Okay, number 5, let's pretend. Let's pretend is, sort of like no problem. It is a powerfully, it's a fantastically powerful 2-word phrase. Let's pretend takes pressure off. Children can do just about anything when they're playing. They can pretend and they can just have a ball, and there's very little pressure on a child in their play. Why? Because they're pretending. When you're pretending, you're not committing to anything. So adults don't pretend nearly enough, and they don't think about, things as, unless they're making a commitment, sort of making a decision. It's sort of, no, I don't want to do it, So let me give you an example of what I mean. A for sale by owner. If you say to a for sale by owner, what are you going to do if you don't sell this house? Oh, I can sell this house, no problem. I know how to sell this house. And then you say, well, yeah, sometimes people don't though. You're getting into an argument, number one. Number two, you're not getting them past their own mental picture. They can't see beyond that they're going to sell this house and they don't need an agent. But if I could get them to play make-believe, if I could get them to pretend, they'll talk about anything. Oh, no, I'm sure you can sell the house. By the way, anybody can sell anything if they price it low enough, right? I'm sure you can sell the house. Let's pretend you don't. Okay. Oh, okay. That's exactly what'll happen when you want to suggest something and they're resisting, you know. So let's talk about what we should how we should structure an offer. Oh, no, I'm not ready to write an offer yet, Walt. Okay, no, I understand. If you're not ready, goodness knows I don't want you to do anything you're not comfortable doing. Let's pretend you were. Let's pretend. Now, I'll tell you sometimes if this is powerful. This is not in my seminar, but here's another tip. When you ask a question, get an answer to the question you asked. That is a mantra. Those of you who've known me for a while know I say that all the time. If you go to the trouble of asking a question, I'm hoping you did it for a purpose and not to shoot the breeze. If you don't get an answer, you're not moving forward. If I ask you a question and you don't answer it, you won't get away with that. And some of you know that. I mean, I don't mean it like getting away with something. People tend sometimes not to answer questions that you ask. So you ask a question, what are you going to do if this house doesn't sell? If they don't answer that question was pointless. Well, this house is going to sell. Everybody, houses are selling in 3 days. Well, why do you say that? Well, I didn't get an answer to that question. The question is, what are you going to do if it doesn't sell? Now, sometimes you ask a question and they don't have an answer. When do you feel would be a good time for you to put your home on the market? Well, I'm not really sure. Well, I didn't ask them if they're sure. I asked them when is the time they think they would like to put the home on the market. So I'm going to say, well, if you had to pick a time, when would you pick a time? See, I'm going to get an answer. And if you don't get an answer the first time, ask the question a second or third time, changing the words. So when do you think you'd like to put the home on the market? Well, I'm not ready to put the home on the market. Well, I didn't ask if he's ready or not. I asked when he wanted to. Okay. Now I don't say that out loud, by the way. I'm giving you that for insight. So I say, okay, well, if you were to put it on the market, when do you think that would be? See, I'm asked the same question in a different way. Well, I don't really know, Walt. This is powerful. Let's pretend you knew. Pretend you knew. Oh, okay. In a month. That's what'll happen all the time. Pretend you had an answer. See, when they can't give you an answer, I don't really know, Walt. Pretend you knew. Oh, because once they go into pretend mode, the pressure's off. But they say usually the truth. They give you insight. And again, my only mission here is to help them. And my mission with you is to give you words that'll make it easier for you to find out what you need to find out so you can help them. Okay, number 6, you're sure. You're sure is when you get a weak yes. So you ask somebody for a commitment and they're kind of like, I guess if you want to. Well, that's not the way to go on a listing appointment. Why don't we do this? I don't mind. Let's pick a time and get together, take a look at your house. I'll give you some ideas on what you should fix up, what you shouldn't fix up. And that way, when you do start making your repairs, you'll know exactly what you should do. Well, I guess if you want to come over, I suppose. By the way, I never want to go on a listing appointment because I want to go over. And I do want to go over. But I want to go on a listing appointment because they want me to come over. So they give me this kind of weak, mumbly yes, yeah, I suppose, whatever. Are you sure? And it gets a stronger yes, a better commitment. Why don't we go back to the office? Let's take a look at this on paper, maybe put something together so you could see what an offer would look like. Well, I guess. What do you think? Yeah, well, I don't know. We're kind of bit. I suppose if you want us to, if you think we should, are you sure? That's going to get a little more commitment. Now, sometimes you don't even get something that's a weak yes. You get some kind of completely different set of words. So you're talking to a for sale by owner and you're suggesting you'll come over and take a look at the house and give them some insight as to, what kind of marketing he could do to enhance, getting the home on, sold. So, what's a good time to come over? If you're going to, I'd like to come over, what would be a good time? would it be okay if I come over? I got to get to my yes, no question. Would it be okay if I can come over? Well, if you're going to come over and just list your house, I'm not going to list the house. I had agents come over here and all they want to do is list the house. I'm not talking about listing the house. You want to come over? So they didn't give me a yes. They didn't give me a no. They didn't answer my yes, no question. So I'm going to come back with is that a yes? With a smile. Now, you sure? And is that a yes? Both have to be delivered with a smile. But that is a effective way to move either weak or kind of, non-commitment to commitment. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Number 8 is another one, especially if you work with first-time buyers. If somebody sold a house 7 times, or first-time sellers for that matter, or they bought 7 houses, they're pretty comfortable with the process. They may still not quite understand it. It does change. They haven't done it in the last few years, maybe, but they're comfortable. First-timers, whether they be a buyer or a seller, they've never been there before. So sometimes you simply need to give them an assurance. Sometimes it's as simple as don't worry. Sometimes it's go ahead. It's okay. It's just sort of a phrase, an assurance. They hold the pen, they're ready to sign the offer. It is the home they want, and now they're starting to get a little nervous. Sometimes it's as simple as you smile, you nod, and you say, go ahead. And next thing you know, there goes the finger, the hand's moving, and the paper gets signed. Fair enough is, again, like no problem, and let's pretend, very powerful. And fair enough gets you buy-in to what you've just said far more often than if you don't use the phrase. Why don't I come over and take a look at your house? And when I do, I can give you some ideas of what you should fix, maybe more importantly, what you don't spend a lot of money on. Fair enough? See, when I end with fair enough, people don't want to be unfair. And that's going to give me a yes more often, than not. Let's go ahead and go back to the office. Let's take a look at what an offer might look like. And that way you can better decide if you want to move ahead with this house. Fair enough? And that is going to be very, very helpful in gaining yeses more often. And then finally, I don't mind. Another powerful phrase. I used to use it all the time. I teach this to people all the time. It's an easy one. Whenever you want the other party to do something, if you tell them you don't mind, it's amazing how well that works. Why don't we do this? I don't mind. Let's pick a time we can get together. I'll take a look at your house. And while I'm there, I'll give you an idea of, what price you should be marking it at. That way, when you are ready to put the home on the market, you'll have some idea of what you're looking at. Fair enough? So you can combine these. Fair enough, I don't mind. They go together hand in hand when you're making appointments beautifully. Okay, so there are some money makers designed to move the process through any bumps that you might encounter. Let me talk to you about some winning words. Now, winning words, they're the same kind of thing, except I group them into a separate category because they are designed to create what I call and what others call a win-win mentality. These words put a positive spin on what you're talking about, and they often replace words that aren't, in the win category, if you will. You'll see what I mean in a moment as I go through them. So winning words. The first one is reasonable. Reasonable diffuses tension. Now, there's a right and a wrong way to use reasonable. You use reasonable when what you're presenting, you'd like them to get some buy-in to it. You don't use reasonable when the other party is talking to you and they're not being reasonable. Well, that's not reasonable. That is a bad use of the word reasonable. I would never recommend you say that. I'll tell you where reasonable and some of these other words are very, very powerful. If you only did this, you would discover the power of these winning words. I have a little, what's the word I want? I have a little speech I often make, and that is how sometimes when I'm working with buyers and sellers, I'm amazed at how much they hate each other. And, not all. Some of you have worked with transactions where your buyer and your seller, whether you represented both sides or another agent represented both sides, they all got along. But often, and of course, I got a little skewed view because nobody ever calls me up and says, Walt, I just wanted you to know I'm closing a transaction today, and everybody loves everybody. We didn't have any problems. It was wonderful. Just thought you should know. I don't get those calls. I get the other kind of call. Walt, I'm in the middle of a transaction and everybody hates everybody, and I've got a problem. See, okay. So I'm not saying you do anything wrong, but I am saying that sometimes agents add to the tension between buyers and sellers. And so it's sort of like you represent a seller, and here comes a repair request, and it's got 30 items on it, including repainting half the rooms because they don't like the smudges on the wall. Well, as a listing agent, that's ridiculous. You present it that way to a seller, and the seller likes the buyer less. And the first key to getting a buyer and a seller to cooperate is to get them to like each other. That really is important. So my way of presenting this repair request with 30 items, and I know it's ridiculous in many ways, it's not ridiculous from the buyer's perspective, especially if they're a first-time buyer. It's not ridiculous if, unfortunately, their agent didn't guide them a little better. And so I can, with an absolute clear conscience, say to a seller, this is reasonable when you consider this is a first-time buyer and they don't know that you don't buy a perfect house. And you and I know that. We don't have to agree to all of this. And certainly, a couple of things here, you might kind of smile and wonder, but it's reasonable that a buyer might ask. A lot of people, they have the attitude, well, it doesn't hurt asking. And it doesn't mean if you say no, it's the end of the world to them. It's reasonable to sometimes encounter a buyer that asks for maybe a little too much. That's how I presented every repair request. And I'm not saying, cave in and give the buyer what he wants. I'm not saying the buyer is deserving of all these things. I'm not saying the seller needs to do these things, but I am trying to get the seller not to hate the buyer, so reasonable. And it diffuses tension sometimes, Well, from their perspective, it's reasonable when you, well, I'm not looking at it from this. Oh, I know, I understand that. But it's just, so reasonable is a nice word. Fair is another word that you've got to, again, be careful. You should never accuse anybody of not being fair. That is a very bad negotiating tactic. Well, that's not fair. People think they're fair. It's rare that somebody says to me, Walt, I know I'm obnoxious. I know I'm asking for everything I'm not entitled to. I know that I'm being ridiculous, but this is what I want. They actually may be a little obnoxious. They may be asking for way more than they're entitled to, but in their mind, they think it's fair. They think it's fair. So I'm never going to say to the other side when I'm trying to resolve a problem, you're not being fair. That's not fair. This isn't fair. See, that's a bad use of fair. I am going to use fair when somebody makes a good attempt at resolving it. I don't have to agree, but if I can say, well, it's a fair offer, from your perspective, I understand that. The seller's not going to accept it, but it's a fair offer. They're never going to say, by the way, I've done this for years. They're never going to say, well, since it's fair, they have to accept it. See, that's what our fear is. Our fear is we don't want to say it's fair because it gives up leverage. It doesn't give up any leverage. Something can be fair, but you can still say no. You can meet somebody for the first time and want to go home with them, and that may sound fair to you, but they can still say no. See, just because it's fair doesn't mean it has to be agreed to. So saying something is fair is a good way to diffuse tension. Another word along the same line is standard. Now you got to be careful. Don't use standard in a commission sense, although it's perfectly legal for you to say that's your standard commission. You can't imply that it's a standard industry-wide, but you can certainly say it's Walt Klein's standard commission is 6%. That's my standard. There's nothing illegal about that. But standard is, again, when the client's afraid that they're being taken advantage of, they're making a mistake, that something's not quite, they don't think it's reasonable. Sometimes the word, well, this is kind of standard, doesn't mean you have to agree. By the way, I tag that often if I feel like the client is challenged by what some of these things they're asked to do. Along the same lines, normal. I use that a lot. Back with reasonable. It's normal for a buyer to ask for way too many things. That's normal. And I say it with a smile and a chuckle, just like I delivered it. If you could see my face, you'd see me kind of smiling and saying that. It's normal for a buyer to ask for a lot. We don't have to agree, but it's normal. And it creates less tension, less hostility, and you have a smoother transaction. Comfortable is another nice word. I want you to be comfortable. Are you comfortable? I used to use all the time. Back to that commission. I rarely cut my commission. I can honestly tell you that. And sometime I'll do a seminar on how you can protect your commission better than a lot of agents do. I know there's a lot of pressure downward on commission, but I think sometimes agents sabotage their own best efforts at getting what I think is a fair and reasonable standard commission. So sometimes people say, I just want you to know I'm not paying 6%. No problem. No, I'm really, I'm serious. If you're going to charge me 6%, I don't even bother sitting down. Well, no problem. Didn't work there. But here's the key though. I didn't create any more tension. He's creating the tension. I didn't diffuse a lot of it, but I didn't add to it by having a commission discussion with him yet. This is a true statement. They're not going to pay anything they're not comfortable paying. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to come down to 3% or 4%. And that didn't mean I was coming down. What it meant was I got to get them comfortable paying me 6%, or they're not going to pay me. So I could say, back to my little example there, right at the early part of the presentation, when they really were pressuring about this commission, it's obviously big on their mind. Let me tell you, let me assure you, I'm not going to have you pay me anything more than you're comfortable paying. Fair enough? See how that, I just can't help putting these money makers in. So comfortable is a nice phrase sometimes. Okay. We or us, that puts you in the picture. That's pretty obvious. Use we or us whenever you can. Make yourself part of the equation. Why don't we do this? When will we get together for the, why don't we put it off? Why don't we decide what kind of price you want to pay? See, all the we's instead of you, by itself. Okay. Investment, of course, I'm going to talk about words not to use, but obviously investment's much better than cost of payment. It's a winning word. Investment is a very nice phrase to use whenever you're talking about cost or payment. Paperwork or agreement, much better phrase than contract. Approve or okay versus sign. I need you to sign here. That there's a psychological people don't like to sign stuff because they think it's, they're uncomfortable. They think they need signing away their life. You never heard this expression. I'm going to approve away my life, but you've heard I'm signing away my life. That's the psychology behind the negative nuance of the word sign. Approve or okay is good. And then finally, compensation. I'm going to tell you again. Payment and commission, bad word. Compensation, good word. All right, let's talk about how we doing time-wise. Yeah, like I say, we're going to run I'm going to try to keep it not more than 10 over. Hopefully you're finding these phrases helpful. 8 priceless phrases. I got 8 phrases. And the phrases say so much more than the words themselves. You can accomplish a lot more than you might even realize with the phrases that I'm about to show you. So let me give you a few powerful phrases, in my opinion. Okay, so the first one is the next step. The next step, or sometimes let's take the next step, is another way you can use it, is a way to avoid coming off as pushy or aggressive. You simply tell them, okay, the next step is we go ahead and sit down and we'll go through this paperwork here, and I'll explain a few things and show you where some decisions need to be made. See, the next step is a very nice way to introduce what you want to do next. Very, very assertive, but not at all pushy. All right. This is not unusual. And it's sort of a phrase that builds on, this is normal. This is not unusual. Everything's going as scheduled. This often when there's a lot of turmoil and something's, completely unraveling, I have a little saying that I say, and that is, I used to say to clients all the time, are you familiar with Murphy's Law? And they always say yes. And you smile and I nod and I'd say, okay, well, there's a real estate corollary to Murphy's Law. And that corollary is Murphy was an optimist. It's normal. It's not unusual for all these things to happen, so it's not unusual is a nice phrase to diffuse when there's quite a bit of tension and turmoil. And the same thing is, well, this is a minor bump in the road. Now, I don't mean to diminish it. You want to be careful how you use this, but on the big scheme of things, you moving to Atlanta and being there by June 1st, this is really a minor bump. Now, it's a bump you got to get over. The buyer's all upset. The termite report came back and there's a lot more money than anybody thought. And the seller didn't agree to do termite work. But relative to life, we don't sell houses. We sell lifestyles. We make lifestyles possible. And lifestyles are huge. When you sell somebody's house in San Diego so they can move to Atlanta, you're making Atlanta possible. And what goes with Atlanta? Whatever reasons, which they're multiple, whatever benefits, I'm hoping they're multiple, they get. That's what we are doing. We're getting them to Atlanta, to the dream job, back to being with the, wife's family, and the kids get to, grow up with grandma and grandpa, back to, you like the East Coast better than the West Coast. That's what we do. So the termite hassle, nightmare, headache, it's a minor bump in the road to you. And then I didn't put that in there, but what you want to say is to what their ultimate goal is. That's the big deal, the goal, not the little bumps along the way. Okay. Everything should work out okay. Everything will work out. Sometimes clients just need assurance that it's going to work out. Now I don't like so much everything's going to work out. I like should work out, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes people, in spite of my best efforts, still don't take my advice. So it may not work out. But those kinds of things, simple assurances without assuring them that there's not ultimately something that needs to be dealt with. All right. Let me double check to be sure. I spent a lot of time in medicine, and I will tell you, physicians are not adverse to double checking. They're not averse to telling me, certainly when I see them, and I don't have a lot of medical problems, but, I have a couple like anybody my age. And if you have any medical problems at all, you probably can remember sometime when the physician said, I want to check on it. That's people that really, really know that their answers count. Their answers, and in real estate, our answers should count. I like to say we're real estate doctors. We're real estate physicians. Our answers should count. So what does that mean? That means we shouldn't just shoot off the hip. Now, what's kind of nice in real estate is it's not life or death. It's not a real, life or death emergency. Nobody's bleeding to death at this moment. If the emergency room doctor said, well, before we put a tourniquet on this or stop this bleeding, I need to double check, I'd be a little concerned. But before we prescribe medicine, before we prescribe the course that we're going to follow for the next 3 months, I'd like to check on a couple things. It might just be getting some more tests, but they're going to check. So real estate is more like that. It's not you're on the emergency room gurney and you're gushing blood and you will die in 3 minutes. By the way, I say this with love. You know, I've spent a lot of years in those kinds of situations as the caregiver. So when agents say to me, I say this with love. I don't mean to say that your problem isn't important. Obviously it is. I make my career dealing with it. I interrupt my days, my evenings, and my weekends to deal with them. But I'm smiling when I say this. It's not an emergency. I know what an emergency is. An emergency is if I don't do something, that patient's going to die in 3 minutes. That's an emergency. So real estate's not an emergency. You know, it's urgent sometimes. It's stressful. It's important. It's all those other things. We can double check to be sure. So whenever you're asked a question, you're not pretty sure. And I'm sometimes very impressed that I have agents calling me and their clients ask them questions and they give me the dialogue. You know, I told them I wanted to double check with my manager to find out. I'm always very impressed with that. So I'm not telling some of you what you already don't know, but I'm telling some that are inclined to think they need to knee-jerk answer everything. No, you don't. You can say, let me check to be sure. You can sometimes add to it. You know, things change all the time. I want to make sure my answer is current to today's situation. So you can sort of, you know, soften that, gee, I don't know, let me find out response. That's not what you're saying if you choose these words carefully. Okay. I need your help. Another beautiful phrase. People love to help. I can tell you, I often start requests that people have ignored. They've ignored, the other agent has ignored your repeated requests to get paperwork. I call them up and I don't lecture them. I don't bawl them out. I don't tell them why we need them and how important it is and they're not doing their job and yada, yada, yada. I simply say, hey, Bob, I need your help. Can you help me out? It's amazing. Well, yeah, what do you need? Yeah, people do not like to not be helpful. People like to be helpful. I need your help. I need that paperwork on the disclosures we sent you. I really need those back. Can you help me with that? And by the way, to build on that, when they say yes, I find out when. Very specific. Yeah, sure. Okay, thanks. Click. That ain't gonna work. All right. Yeah, sure. Okay, you send it to me. Yeah, sure. Okay, when can I expect it? When should I be looking for it? I don't know, sometime today or tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow at the latest. Yeah, okay. By the end of the day or by halfway through the day, when? And then I'll label it. I know I'm being a little pushy. Don't put but behind that because you are being pushy. I am being pushy. So, when tomorrow? All right, by the end of the day. Okay. The end of my day is 5:30. When do you end your day? 5 o'clock. Okay, great. I'll see you at 5 tomorrow. Great. Thanks for your help. Bye. Click. So I'm going to get that specific time, by the way. All right. How open-minded are you about? That is a beautiful phrase also. When you want to introduce something that they might be, a little bit hesitant, ask them about is whatever you're going to introduce. So how open-minded are you about maybe researching the repairs you're going to make to be sure you get your money back on them? See, people do not just like they don't want to be not helpful, they don't want to be closed-minded. So when you want to propose doing something, ask them how open-minded are they about whatever it is you want to propose. And then finally, this is a tweak on what is a common expression agents use. And I'm not saying it's a bad expression. This one might be better psychologically. When you say any questions, that puts them mentally in a very busy, noisy state. They busily got to try to figure out what question, say, should they have questions? Yeah, I don't have questions, but I got to think about what he said. Should I have questions? So instead of any questions, if you say, what questions do you have? If they have a question, they're going to tell you. That's great. But if they don't have a question, they're they're often going to say, no, I don't have any questions. Now, if they don't have any questions, you take the next step. Whatever the next step is, okay, great. Well, then let's take a look at the paperwork. Say, what questions do you have for me is a more powerful close than any questions. All right. And then finally, and we are going to get done not later than 10 minutes late, because I just got one last category to go through. And then if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those as well. But 8 words and phrases to avoid. And some of these are going to be just review, so it should go fairly quickly. Words and phrases that are often commonly said, but have negative and unintended consequences. So let me remind you of words that I would say you should go out of your way avoiding. And it's sort of a conscious decision you got to make. And it's going to take time, because many of these phrases and words we say reflexively out of our subconscious. So you need to, it's interesting I say that, you need to condition yourself not to say them. And the very first one I'm going to tell you is avoid saying you need to. Because the reason I said that is I read it and I looked down at my notes and I read it and I got an auto suggestion there. People don't need to do anything that you want them to do. They might need to do what they want to do. So you need to is generally a very negative way. Well, you need to review this and then let me know what you want to do. Just drop the you need to. They don't need to do, just keep this in your mind. They don't need to do anything from their perspective. If you would like to keep this transaction on track, we should respond to this repair request this afternoon. It's a much better way than saying you need to respond to this by this afternoon. You need to. People psychologically, subconsciously, it's very, very pressury, pushy, and it puts them in a feeling that you are dictating to them a course of action they may not be comfortable taking. So I don't want to dictate it to them in a way they think I'm dictating. So I'm going to give them a reason and then suggest a course of action. I'm not going to use the phrase you need to. All right. I and me is the next one. You should avoid I and me as much as possible. Replace it with you and we, as much as you can. I tell agents all the time, especially newer agents, especially when they're going on a listing presentation against a heavy hitter, a top producer. You have an edge on the top producer unless the top producer is very, very well trained and is still functioning the way they were trained to function. And that is, I don't want to step on any top producers' toes that are on this call, but I think you probably will agree with me. Top producers tend to inadvertently focus on their experience, what they do, how many houses they've sold, how much market share they have on a listing presentation. And there's a good reason for that, because they have an impressive market share. When a newer agent is going up against a heavy hitter like that, you're not going to be able to compete on that. You don't have as many listings. You don't have as big a market share. You don't have as many past clients. You don't have as many years experience. So you don't want to compete on that. So what you want to do is reframe the entire mindset of the seller. And how do you do that? Talk about the seller the whole time, because that will contrast interestingly, and sometimes to your advantage, when they contrast your dialogue with the dialogue they had with the top producer. When you're focusing on the client, what's important to you? How can I help you? What do you want to, accomplish by this move? Why do you feel this? Spend time with that. Stay away from the I and me. A new agent can elevate their game relative to an experienced agent by simply keeping that in mind. Number 3, we talked about it, contract. Avoid contract, use the word agreement instead. Number 4, commission or fee. Fee is the same way. A commission or a fee is something the client pays. They're paying a commission. I don't know if I want to pay that much. I don't know if you're worth that much pay. Compensation is earned. I would always, always, always replace commission and my fee with the word compensation. My compensation for this is it's what I earn. It's a psychological minor point. It's not a 10, it's at least a 4, maybe a 5. All right. Payment, the other one. Payment, avoid a payment. These are phrases to avoid. I almost didn't want to write them down because, you're looking at them, but I already talked about good phrases, good words. I wanted to give you a list of bad ones. So, of course, investment instead of payment. All right. The next one's a pet peeve of mine. People don't realize how badly this is perceived when they say it. To be honest, I'm telling you what the client thinks when you say that. So you're not always honest. You have to point out that you're being honest now. It's what I think. It's what everybody thinks. Now, the one problem sometimes you have is you inadvertently say something because you heard it a minute before. I inadvertently said you need to because I just looked at my paper. And so I said, you need to not use these phrases. So that's going to happen. Don't beat yourself up too much. Just drop it as much as you possibly can in your dialogue. To be honest is not a good phrase to ever, ever, ever use. Just in conjunction with that, honestly, frankly, candidly. I think I spelled that right. My spell check said it was right. I don't know if it knew what word I was trying to say. Those are not great words. They should be avoided because when you say honestly, psychologically, you're saying, okay, I'm going to set this out. I'm going to be honest now. And the psychological response on the client, on the recipient side is, gee, weren't you just honest for the last 20 minutes? Maybe you weren't. Drop those. All right. Do you know about, or what do you know? Now, I was talking to an agent just the other day, and I always present it the same way. I'll present it this way now. People have egos. Women have egos, men have egos. I think the women on this call would agree that men sometimes have inflated egos, and they sometimes are very, very sensitive to maintaining those egos. And so I think, women, not to be sexist, but I think women have learned to deal with men's egos much better than men have learned to deal with women's egos. Now, my point isn't to talk about egos as much as to point out that if you are talking to a man and you say, do you know? Let me tell you, as a man, and I think I speak for most men, there's no question you can ask me that I'm not going to attempt to answer for you. I'm not going to attempt to tell you, oh, I know, because my ego would be too crushed if I say, gee, I have no idea. Now, if you don't believe that, after the seminar, call me up, ask me anything you want. So for sure, you should never say to a man, do you know? Because if they don't know, they're never going to admit it, and they're going to like you less for putting them on the spot. And they're going to cautiously say, well, yeah, but they're going to be worried about you're going to quiz them next because they don't know. So don't ask people what they know, especially men. I say that with a smile. Ask them, here's the good phrase. Replace it. Instead, use, are you familiar with? Now, most people, including all men, can comfortably say, oh, yeah. And in their mind, I don't know all about it, but I'm very familiar with it. Yes, I'm familiar with it. Now, the next phrase after that is, as you know, and then tell them what they probably might not know. More importantly, tell them what you want to tell them. So replace do you know or what do you know about with are you familiar with? All right. And then finally, the word but. The word but is a negator. When you use the word but, you negate everything you said beforehand. And now what you say is what's the real issue, the real point. And so often we use but thinking, we make a statement thinking that we're cushioning what we're about to say. So we make a nice statement, then we add but, and then we go ahead and say what we need to say. And what we don't realize is what we said before but went right out the window. Now, if you don't believe me, just think about this. Think about your significant other calling you up and saying, honey, I love you, but your heart's going to go right down or right up to your throat. Oh, God, what's she going to say next? What's he going to say next? You know, that I love you. You're not thinking, oh, it's so nice. You called me to say I love you. I learned this from my wife. We were newlyweds and my wife was doing things that I thought I didn't want her to do, kind of, you know, irritating me. So I did say that. I said, hey, you know, I love you, but, and she walked out of the room. And it kind of struck me right in the middle of a conversation. I don't think we were married 6 months. I'm in the middle of a conversation. She walks out of the room. I don't get to tell her what I really want to tell her. So I went and caught up with her and I said, honey, I want to talk to you. She said, oh, okay, sure. What do you want to talk about? Well, you know, I love you, but she looked at me and she started to walk out again. I said, what's going on here? And she said, well, if you love me, then there is no but. You know, well, I do love you. All right. Well, then don't tell me what you want to tell me, you know, unless you want to tell me that. You know, I love you, but I don't want to hurt your feelings. Well, I'm going to hurt your feelings. So that's not the way you want to say it. You want to just approach it directly. Don't make a but statement like that. Now, sometimes the but statement is very effective. Why? Because you do want to negate what you said before. Let me give you an example where that can be very powerful. The effective use of the word but to reduce the likelihood of rejection of something you want to propose, providing that your proposal is reasonable. So to increase the likelihood of getting buy-in, sometimes the but to negate, using it in the right way, I want to negate what I'm going to say. So I want to negate the following statement. I'm not sure it's for you. But now, why do I go to this trouble? Because the I'm not sure it's for you is a great opening when you want to suggest somebody to take a course of action they might not want to take. So when you say, I'm not sure it's for you, I'm not sure it's for you, their curiosity is, what is it you want to say? What do you want to say? What's not for me? What's not for me? And they even get buy-in a little bit. You haven't even said it yet. Well, I'll be the judge of that. Maybe it is for me. How do you know it's not for me? They're already challenging that it's not for them. When you say, I'm not sure it's for you, that opens them up. Now I want to negate that it's not for them and tell them what they should do. So I'm going to lead then or conjunct the two phrases, the phrase that I want them to do with the word but. I'm not sure it's for you, but if you want to secure this home, I'm recommending you write at the minimum a full price offer. See, what you've done is, without having to explain it as much, you might have to explain it. What you have done is increase the likelihood they're going to buy into it because you led with, I'm not sure it's for you. I'm not sure it's for you, but in this market, buyers are writing offers at least full price and often over. And so that's the great correct use of the word but to emphasize what you're about to say. And the I'm not sure it's for you is a very nice lead in to what you want to propose, because they're already inclined to want to buy into it and they haven't even heard about it yet.